This morning, I've been thinking for several weeks about what do you share with a congregation for the very first day of a brand new year? And generally, if the lead pastor would share a vision for what's going on, but I'm not him. So I'm going to share something else. So I want to share something that I believe is pertinent for us today. And that is, I want to share today about starting the new year right. And I want to talk today about the path to heaven. Because knowing the path to heaven will start your new year right. You recognize as well as I do that 2022 is gone. Some of you are saying, very good. Very good. It's over. I am ready for a new year to start. Last year had things going on that you're just glad to have it over with. Some of you over the last few days have made New Year's resolutions. I'm sorry that you'll be so disappointed in a few weeks. Some of you may have decided to change an attitude, or perhaps change an action in your life during this 2023 time. Maybe you've decided that this will be the year that you're going to be more focused with your walk in the Lord. Maybe you've decided this is going to be the year that I'm going to read the Bible from cover to cover, even the book of Leviticus. Well, if you've decided to do those things, you're starting out the new year right. And with the Lord's help, you will make good progress. Now, for those of you who do know me, you know that I really believe that the Bible is true from cover to cover, even on the inside page where it says genuine leather. For me, the Scripture provides a clear life direction. It gives me insight into personal and external challenges that I have. It provides comfort for me when I'm feeling down. It gives me understanding when I lack knowledge. It gives me conviction when I need to be firm in what the Word has to say and not be waffling because of the times in which we live. It gives me perseverance to continue to move forward even when others would say, go ahead and bail. But you see, the Scripture is very, very clear. There's a theme that just goes through the entire Bible from cover to cover, and that theme is that it is God's desire for every person to have a personal relationship with Jesus. For those of you that are here today and you've been born again, you've got that personal relationship with Christ, you realize that your relationship in Christ is more important than your relationship with anyone else. It's the absolute best. It's better than the relationship that you have with your best friend. Your relationship with Jesus is better than your relationship with your mom or your dad or your sisters or your brothers or even your spouse. And because we're talking today about starting the year out right and knowing the path to heaven, because you have a relationship deep in your heart, you also want those that you care about to know the way also. Knowing the way to heaven is important for you personally, but it's also important for others that you point them in the way which they can start their year out well also. People like your spouse, like your kids, like your mom and dad, like your relatives, like your casual relationships, and even those divine appointments that God drops on you from time to time as you're out in the marketplace. The reality is that lives are in the balance when people don't know how and don't know the way to heaven. I wanted you to turn with me now to the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verses 1 through 6. Jesus is doing the speaking, and he says, now this is good news, so listen. It says, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way?" And Jesus said to him, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." Now, in the Gospel of John, starting in verse 14, it's really a continuation of a conversation that Jesus has been having with his disciples. So he picks up, it's an ongoing conversation that he has. It's a conversation that he is having with his disciples about the fact that he is going to be leaving this earth and he's going to be returning to heaven. It's a conversation with them about the way to heaven and the assurance that they too can have a home in heaven. He's preparing them. And this conversation that he's having with his disciples is also a conversation that relates to you and I. Because Jesus wants us to know that heaven is available to every single one of us. He wants us to know that Jesus is there for us also, and that we can have assurance of heaven. He's trying to communicate this with his disciples. Now, if you put yourself in the disciples' shoes, you can understand that they were concerned because Jesus had just informed them that he was leaving. Now, think about this. It would be very easy for one of the disciples to have said, "You're leaving? What do you mean you're leaving? You ask us to follow you. We've given 3 years of our life. We've been with you day in and day out, and now you're leaving. You're checking out. You're going someplace else. That doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair." But Jesus is trying to communicate with them that he is leaving and that he was trying to prepare them for the crucifixion, which was only a few days away. And they were afraid that he was going to leave them and they could not go with him because they had always gone with him. We need to remember that they've been inseparable for 3 years now, and they were concerned. Well, here we are. Some 2,000 years later, and nothing has changed. People still want to know the way to heaven. They still ask the question, what must I do to obtain heaven? Will there be a place for me in heaven? And there are so many that are not sure. It's the question of the ages that has plagued mankind. For some of us this morning in this room, it is the 800-pound gorilla with the question of, if you were to die today, do you know for sure that you would go to heaven? And the question scares you to death because you don't know the answer. Well, here's the one thing I do know for certain. Absence of the Lord's imminent return, and I don't rule that out, we know that no one is getting out alive. Everyone is going to die physically. So when the question is, what do I need to do to know for sure? It's an important question. As a pastor, several times a year, I receive a call from a family member or a friend within the church about someone that's meaningful to them that has passed away. And as a pastor, the first thing that goes through my mind every time I receive that call is I wonder, I hope they knew the Lord. You see, in the past several years, we have had some funerals at Crossroads from some exceptionally fine believers that really did live the life. And in those funerals, there's always some sadness because of the loss. But there is an equal mix of gratefulness and hope into that service because they know that the individual knew the Lord and had a walk with the Lord. And this knowledge fills the entire service with hope for life, for a life that was well lived and committed to the Lord. But the opposite's also true. In those funerals where we memorialize an individual that did not know the Lord, that had no relationship with the Lord, all I can say to you is that without Jesus, there is no hope of heaven. And all you can do as a pastor is comfort those that are left behind. In my family, perhaps like yours, we have a tradition that's been going on for about 50 years. It started with my grandmother. And at Thanksgiving time, during Thanksgiving every year, everyone in the family would come to her house. Now, my grandmother lived in a little place. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and we crammed in there. We spilled over into the hallways. We were outside. I mean, we were everywhere. You couldn't put all the people in the room. That continued on for a number of years. My grandmother passed away. My mother picked up the mantle, and she had everybody come over to her house. There was a little more room there. And I remember several years ago now, after the crowds had begun to die down and people had begun to leave, and my uncle Jesse was there, and his wife Connie were there, and my mom were there, and my sister and her family were there. And Uncle Jesse says to me, Chet, Connie and I are preparing for the end of our life, and we would like for you to do our funeral, and we'd like to make those arrangements now with you. And that thought came back to my mind about my Uncle Jesse. Now, Uncle Jesse, by worldly terms, was a man's man. He was a big guy. I'm sure that he had closed many a bar in his day. He had chased plenty of women in his time. He had a mouth. He was a rough and tough kind of a guy by worldly standards. But when you get ready to talk about spiritual things, my Uncle Jesse wasn't so tough. But in our family, the men never talk publicly about anything. You have to go out to the garage. Or perhaps you go in the backyard. You can't have a real conversation in front of the family. And I said, Uncle Jesse, why don't you and I go outside and we'll talk for a couple of minutes? Okay. So we went outside, and so I said, Uncle Jesse, I want to just be honest with you. I don't want to do a funeral for a guy that's lost, who doesn't have a relationship with the Lord. Do you have a relationship with the Lord, Jesse? No. Why not? Well, I don't know. Well, Jesse, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Yes. You believe that he died on the cross for man's sin? Yes. You believe that he rose from the dead? Yes. You believe he's coming again? Yes. Went through all the questions. So, Jesse, what's keeping you from becoming a believer? What's keeping you from inviting Christ to come into your life? I said, I don't know. I'm just not ready. Well, Jesse, you better make up your mind. You're 80 years old. We had a good talk. The rest of the day finished. No change. About 9 months later, my mom, Jesse was my mom's brother, Jesse calls and talks to my mom and says, Jeannie, I invited Christ into my life tonight. And being the kind of individual that I am, I'm a little skeptical. Thomas and I had a few things in common. And I said, I'm reminded of 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, therefore, if any man is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things pass away. Behold, all things become new. And so for Chet, I'm going, let's see the fruit. Let's see the fruit. Sure enough, there was fruit. And one day I did his funeral. And I was able to say, my uncle knew the Lord. Now, as we come back to your Bibles, chapter 14, verses 1 to 3, Jesus is doing the talking. It says, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, Jesus is speaking these words to his disciples because he's trying to give them comfort. You see him in a time of intimacy. He is hurt. He knows the hurt that they are feeling. They're feeling, I don't know if the word's betrayed, but Jesus is telling them, hey, I'm leaving, you're staying, and they're hurt. And they're confused, and they're kind of beside themselves. And Jesus is taking time here to provide comfort for them. And I want to say to those of us today that this scripture should do several things for us as well. It should bring us encouragement to know that it should bring us encouragement because of who we know in our lives and in whom we have believed. Believing and knowing God should encourage us. Believers know that we are never alone because we have a relationship with Jesus. Encouragement comes to us when we know that heaven is real. Jesus called God his Father. He knew his Father like a son knows a father. He knew his Father existed. He knew his Father was alive, and he knew his Father was in heaven. And Jesus knew where his Father's house was. The truth of it was a reality, and heaven is real. You've heard the saying that home is where the heart is. Well, Jesus is striving to provide comfort for his disciples by helping them to understand that they and all believers have a home in heaven. In heaven, there is no housing shortage. In heaven, it is a safe place. In heaven is where my people are who know the Lord. And then these verses give us the encouragement from a troubled heart that comes through the work of Jesus in our lives. Imagine Jesus in the upper room and he says, I go and prepare a place for you. For where Jesus was going, he was going to the cross, and he's trying to prep them for that time. Verse 3 again, it says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. The Bible makes a very clear distinction between the believer meeting Jesus in the air and meeting Jesus in the air after he returns, refers to the second coming of Christ. Today we're only going to focus on the meeting Jesus after we breathe our very last breath. Have you thought about it? When you come to that place in your life and you breathe your last breath, what comes after that? Well, let me tell you, it's very clear. Believers pass away from this world directly into heaven. The transition is quick. It's quicker than the blink of an eye. One moment you are here, and the next moment you're in the presence of the Lord. I want to tell you something else about what happens after you breathe your last. There is no visiting with an angel at heaven's gate. There are no 10 questions about your worthiness to enter heaven. There is no time in between to balance the scales of good and bad deeds. There is no more time to become worthy of heaven, because you and I have no worthiness outside of Jesus. The Apostle Paul said that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Our worthiness comes only because we believed and have received Jesus into our life. You've heard the saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. That's critically true when it comes to a relationship and wanting heaven as your home. It's not what you know, it's who you know. For you see, when we die, we are either in Christ, and heaven will be your final destination, or you will not be in the presence of the Lord. Now, as we go to verse 4, we find Jesus saying, and you know the way where I am going. Seems like a harmless enough statement. Jesus saying, you know the way that I am going. And then we we see that Thomas, and Thomas, if you remember properly, was the disciple that after Jesus' death and resurrection and the appearance to many people, he's the one who said, unless I'm able to put my hand in his side and my finger into his hand, I'm not going to believe. Now, when you read verse 5, it says, Thomas said to him, Jesus has made this statement, and you know the way where I am going. Jesus makes that as a statement of matter of fact. It's like everybody should understand. And Thomas says, he said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way? Now, I can read this in two different kinds of tones. Thomas could be saying this in a tone with great reverence because he's talking to Jesus, and he could say, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way? Or he could be saying, are you kidding me? We don't know the way. We don't know how to get to heaven. We don't know where you're going, and we don't know how to get there. You see, Thomas' statement, though, is one that may be reflective of where you are today. You may be saying, Pastor Chet, I don't know the way to heaven either. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. You might be saying, I'm just like Thomas. I know about Jesus. I even memorized John 3:16 one time. But I don't know the way to heaven. I don't know if heaven will be my home. And truthfully, it scares a lot of people because they can't answer that question. But in honesty, you're here today and you say, I want to know Jesus. I want to know that heaven will be my home forever. They did not know where Jesus was going, but Jesus had already told them very clearly. In verse 3, he says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, we're coming to some verses that I'm going to share with you that will probably be on the screen that answer this question about heaven and where we're going and how does one get there. And these are worthy of writing them in your margin. The first one is found in John 3:16, answering the question about how do I get to heaven? What do I have to do? Those kinds of things. John 3:16 says, For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. In John 5:24, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though he die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Then the reference is wrong on the screen, but it's John 10:10. And it says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now I have to ask you the question this morning. I can't leave it undone. If Thomas's thoughts are your thoughts when he said, I don't know the way, I need assurance, then pay close attention to the following verses, because these are also worthy of writing down, highlighting, and memorizing. Look at verse 6. Jesus said to him, This is after Thomas said, I don't get it. I don't know how to get there. I can hear, if I were in Thomas's place during this time, I think I would have probably said, Lord, I don't know where you're going. I'd like to have the street address. I'd like to know the city and the zip code. And if you have the GPS coordinates, I'd like to have those also. Then in verse 6 it says, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. In verse 6, he answers the questions. The question about how do I get to heaven? What is the way? What must I do? For the first directional statement that Jesus makes in verse 6 is this. Jesus says, I am the way, follow me. This is clear. This is clarity. This will transform your life. If you don't know the way, Jesus is saying to you today, Jesus says, I am the way. Follow me. This is clarity. There's a difference between pointing the way and leading the way. The person who leads the way becomes the way. Jesus not only points out how to walk, but he also shows us how to walk, but he also shows us how to do the walking. Knowing the destination is important. Jesus says in response, we don't know where you are going, but he says, follow me. If you don't know where you want to go, any path will take you there. But Jesus says, follow me. In me is eternal life. Jesus goes on to say that I am the truth. Jesus not only told the truth, but he lived the truth. He said, I and the Father are one. And he told the truth when he said, follow me, I am the way. Listen to me, I am the way, follow me, that is truth. And then Jesus declares that he is life, that he is eternal life. Now there's a difference between telling someone about life and actually living the life. And then here's the most critical statement that he makes. Jesus says this, no one comes to the Father but through me. Now there's clarity. Listen to this. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father but through me. This is a defining statement. He is the only way. There is no other way. He is not an alternative way. He is the way. Living the good life is not enough. Being generous without Christ is not enough. Being a good person is not enough. Thomas finds himself in a predicament because he now no longer has an excuse. He is without excuse. He can no longer say that I don't know where you are going because Jesus said he's going to the Father, follow me. Thomas can no longer say I don't know the way because Jesus said I am the way. Thomas can't say I don't know what I need to do because Jesus said I am the way and the truth and the life. Jesus says to us today, believe on me. Now my encouragement this morning to this Crossroads family is this, that you start the new year off right. So let me ask you this. Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Do you believe and understand that Jesus died on the cross for your sins? Do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day? Do you believe that Jesus is coming back? If you do, then you know the way to heaven. So the question is, what will you do with what you now know? Some of you can rejoice and say, praise the Lord. Chet, I know the way. I know the path. I know whom I have believed. But others of you, the Lord brought today for this reason and for this moment, for right now. So what do you need to do? It's so simple. Some of you need to just honestly say, Lord, I need you. You need to say, Lord, in honesty, Lord, I need forgiveness for what I've done in my life. You need to ask the Lord, Lord, I want to give my life to you. I want you to control it instead of me. And then thank him for what he's done for you. And then live this next year in Christ, growing in him. For those of you who already have the assurance of heaven, and you know where you're going to go when your last breath is breathed, then I want to encourage you to make this a great year for those who know you. Be the one who points the way to those that don't know him personally. Let that be a goal for you this year in Christ, to point the way to others.